You know, every single one of us, we hopefully desire to leave behind a godly legacy. We want people to think fondly of us when we die. We want people to think, good thoughts about us. We don't want anyone to think after we're dead, man, I'm sure glad he's gone. Or, we don't want to be remembered for the way we die. Like, did you see how he died? He was such an idiot. We want to be remembered for what we left behind in our life, and we want to be remembered fondly with joy. We want to leave something behind from those that we love. John Maxwell said this about our legacy. Who's got my clicker? There we go. John Maxwell said this. He said, if you are successful, it becomes possible for you to leave an inheritance for others. But if you desire to create a legacy, then you need to leave something in others. When you think unselfishly and invest in others, you gain the opportunity to create a legacy that will outlive you. Tonight, as we close our study on the book of 1 Samuel, we're going to look, of course, at one chapter of 1 Samuel, but then we're going to skip around and look really a comparison on the lives of David and of Saul. We're going to look at the legacy that Saul left and the legacy that David left. Now, my goal for the message tonight is for us to see these two men, to see the legacy that they left in their life, and for us to look at our life and say, Lord, what do I need to adjust so that I don't end up like Saul did? Because, spoiler alert, he didn't leave a good legacy. Lord, what do I need to do differently? What do I need to change in my life so that, Lord, I can leave a legacy like David, a man who had a heart for God and followed God and desired God, instead of, Lord, leaving a legacy like Saul left in his life. So as we see their legacy, we're going to see that Saul allowed sin, disobedience, self-reliance, and just a total rejection of God to destroy his life and the life of his family. So look in your Bibles in 1 Samuel chapter 31. We're going to start reading in verse number 1. We're going to read 10 chapters in this passage tonight. I didn't stutter. 10 chapters. I told you, I have a hard time preaching for 10 minutes. 10 verses tonight. The Bible says in 1 Samuel chapter 31, verse 1, it says, Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. So once again, war has broken out in Israel. The Philistines once again are attacking Israel, and this time Israel is being defeated. The army is being slain in front of the Philistines. Verse 2, And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. So the battle's not going Saul's way. Now you remember when this battle first started going on the horizon, the thing that Saul did was not seek after God. He went to a witch. He went to a woman who practiced witchcraft to try to get her interpretation of what was going to happen. And God had left him. And so now Saul, a good warrior, a good general, a mighty fighter, he goes out against the Philistines, but the battle goes completely against Israel. They are losing their men. Their men are dying by the handfuls. His sons have been killed. And now an archer, some nameless archer, we don't even know who he is or what he was aiming at, but an archer has hit Saul with an arrow, and Saul is wounded. He has no way to get back to Jerusalem, no way to get back to his home country. He's trapped. He's in a pretty difficult situation. Then look at verse number 4. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, Draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. So we look at this, and Saul is asking his armor-bearer to kill him. He looks at the situation. He realizes there's no way for him to get away. He realizes there's no chance for him to escape. And he says, I just want you to kill me. Now, a lot of us, we look at this and we kind of look down at Saul. He's basically committing suicide. It's armor-bearer assisted suicide. But we look at it and say, man, why would he do that? How bad could it possibly be? But historians tell us that the Philistines were extremely evil people when they caught their captives. They would torture them and do everything they could to bring excruciating pain to them without killing them. And many people say that they could keep their prisoners alive for weeks, just enduring horrible torture. And Saul didn't want to go through that. He said, I don't want these uncircumcised people to just do whatever they want to me, to torture me, and to make me suffer this excruciating pain. So please, just kill me. I'm going to die anyway. You know, if they don't get to here soon, this wound's going to kill me. But if they get here real quick, they're going to keep me alive for as long as possible and just slowly kill me. So let's just go ahead and get it over with and kill me now. But look at verse number 4. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. So his armor bearer won't do it. So Saul takes matters in his own hands and he kills himself. He takes his own life. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day together. That's a pretty bad ending, isn't it? But it gets worse for Saul. How can it possibly get worse? Well, let's just look. Verse 7. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side of Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So the entire nation has they've abandoned their city. They are refugees who are fleeing this war, and the Philistines have come, and they've just taken over these cities that Israel has just left. Verse 8, and it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain. So they're going out in the battlefield, and they're taking all the valuables. They're getting all the good armor, getting all the good weapons, making sure there's nothing left there, just kind of picking through. Very disgusting thing they're doing, but that's what they're doing. They found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa, and they cut off his head, stripped off his armor, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. So they cut off his head, and they send his head back to the land of the Philistines for to go on a victory parade throughout the entire nation of the Philistines to show how wonderful they are, and to go into their idols. And Saul's head is being used in idol worship. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, another god there. And they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. That's pretty bad. That's worse than it had gotten. He's dead, so he doesn't really know what's going on here. But his body has been desecrated. His head's put on display. It's kind of throughout a parade throughout the Philistines. His armor is put in one of the false gods. His body is nailed to a wall and another false idol's temple. It's not the way that Saul wanted to end his life. It's not the legacy that Saul wanted to leave behind. Now, we look at the end of Saul's life, we can say, man, that's just a result of just life. When he's fighting this evil people and you die in battle, they're evil people will do evil things. But what we need to understand is what happened at the end of Saul's life. His legacy is not a result of just random things that happened to him. He had a hand in it. It's his fault. What became of him was because of his rejection and his disobedience to God. Over and over in the book of 1 Samuel, Saul struggled to follow God. Saul struggled to be obedient to the voice of God. David, on the other hand, he was a man that obeyed God even when it was difficult. He was a man that obeyed God even when it didn't make sense. And after David's death, and look, we all know David's not perfect. David is far from perfect. In the book of 1 Samuel, he looks pretty good. In the book of 1 Samuel, he's obeying God. He's keeping his hand off of God's man. He's doing what's supposed to. But some more books later, we see that David stays home when he should be at war, and David looks at a woman that he shouldn't be looking at, and David commits adultery, and David kills a man to cover it up, and we see David's huge sin. And we see the result of David's huge sin, that God tells David, because of what you've done, the sword will never pass out of your family. And one of his sons rapes his daughter. Horrific sin that happens in David's life. That is David's fault because of David's sin against God. And we see that his other son rises up to kill him and destroys half his family, and just horrible things that happen. But even after all of that, every king that came after David was compared to him. Every single king. God said, David, he sinned. David was far from perfect. But David loved me more than any other king did. And every king, it was said, he loved the Lord his God, and he obeyed the Lord his God, as did David. or he didn't serve the Lord as David did. Every king David left a godly legacy. Saul's legacy of disobedience, destruction, a horrible end to Saul's death. So tonight, as we look at the life of David and Saul, we're going to see the differences in their life and how they achieved their legacy. And here's the truth I want us to get tonight. The legacy you will leave forever is determined by the life you lead today. The legacy that you leave after you're gone is determined by how you walk with God today. It's determined by how you obey God today. The choices made today will lead to the legacy you leave tomorrow. So we're going to compare two ordinary men. And that's what David and Saul were. David and Saul were ordinary men. There was nothing spectacular about either one of them. Saul, he was tall. I mean, I guess that's good. He could play basketball if they had basketball then. He'd be the center or the forward. The center, yeah, he'd be Duncan. So, I mean, he could play basketball back then, but there was nothing really spectacular about David. They both were just Jewish guys who grew up in the culture. You know, they were both shepherds. They were both farm boys. Neither one of them asked to be king. As a matter of fact, when the people demanded a king and God said, well, you can have Saul, Saul was hiding because he didn't want to be king. Neither one of them asked for the task that God gave them. But when they were given the opportunity, both could have been led by God. Both could have followed God, but only one did. Saul rejected the leadership of God. We have to make the same choice. Will we be led by God? Will we follow God? Or will we decide to do our own thing? Will we decide to please ourselves? Will we do as Saul, we're going to see, will we put ourselves in the place of God in our lives? What you do with God today will determine your legacy that you leave behind. You know, the great, wonderful thing about the gospel and the wonderful thing about God is God desires relationship with us. God desires fellowship with us. But the depth of our relationship, the depth of our fellowship with God, you know who is determined upon? Us. We have to make the choice. Are we going to live in a way that's honoring to God and pleasing God? Are we going to seek Him and follow Him and be led by Him? Or are we going to say, God, I don't need you and I'm going to lead my own life? God desires relationship, but we have a major part in it. So let's look at the major differences between David and Saul, and let's see if we can spot ourselves in their lives. The first difference we notice between David and Saul is one had obedience and one had disobedience. We see obedience versus disobedience. David was an obedient man. Up to this point in the Bible, he has shown himself to be an incredible man. He is so obedient that when Saul told him to go do something, David went and did it. The Bible says in 1 Samuel 18:5. No, go back. Thank you. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely. Whenever the king would come to David and say, hey, David, I need you to go do something. I need you to run this errand. I need you to go over here and kill this group of people. Whatever Saul asked David to do, David did it. David obeyed his king. And what's incredible about this is David is obeying King Saul when David knows I've been anointed king by God. God's told me I'm the king, but I'm still going to obey the person and authority in my life. And he obeys the man who spent most of their relationship trying to kill him, but he still obeyed him. You know, I'll be honest with you. First time my boss tries to kill me with a javelin, and then he says, hey, could you go do this? No. I'm sorry, you just tried to kill me. You're on your own, pal. But not David. David was an obedient man. He didn't base his obedience on Saul's character. But not only did he obey his king, he obeyed his father. When his dad told him to go tend the sheep, you know what he did? He tended the sheep. When his dad, after he is anointed king, Samuel leaves, David's still got the oil on his head where he's just been anointed king over Israel. His dad looks at him and says, okay, David, get back to the sheep. You know what David did? Yes, sir. I'm out of here. Went and listened to and tended the sheep. When his dad calls him and says, yes, great young King David, would you take these Lunchables and go see your brothers and how they're doing in the war. You know what David did? Yes, sir. I'll go do it. He obeyed no matter who he was given orders from. He obeyed his father. He obeyed his king. He obeyed when God told him to be king. He did it. David was obedient. Saul was not. So look right here in 1 Samuel chapter 10. And this is Samuel talking to Saul and says, "And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down unto thee to offer burnt offerings, and to sacrifice sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry till I come to thee and show thee what thou shalt do." Seems like a pretty straightforward command, right? Saul, go down to Gilgal and wait for me there 7 days. In 7 days, I will come. And he doesn't say exactly 7 days. He goes, after 7 days, I'll come. I'll make the sacrifices. I'll do the priestly duties. Saul, you just go wait for me, and then I'll come and take care of it. It's pretty easy to wait, right? Just go and wait. I'll take care of it when I get there. Pretty straightforward. Pretty easy to obey. But Saul didn't do it. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 8, the Bible says, "And he tarried 7 days, according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me, and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass, as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him." It was a time of uneasiness, and Saul decided, you know what, Samuel's not here when he said he should be. And so Saul decided not just to be the king, but Saul said, you know what, since Samuel's not here, I know he told me to wait 7 days, and when he got here, he'd take care of it, but people are getting uneasy, people are starting to leave, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm not only the king, I'm going to make myself the priest. I'm going to do what I'm not permitted to do. So on the 7th day, he offers sacrifices and offerings, and then Samuel shows up. Samuel says, "Saul, what are you doing?" "Well, you weren't here when you said you would be. You weren't here when I needed you, so I decided to take matters in my own hand." You know, in this verse, Samuel didn't give him an escape clause. He didn't say, "Wait 7 days, but if I'm not there when you really need me, you can do it, Saul. You can do it." He said, "You wait, and when I get there, I'll take care of it." But Saul was disobedient. But that's not the only time Saul disobeyed. In chapter 15, God tells Saul, go down to the Amalekites and destroy them. Now, we look at that and we think, man, that's kind of, how could God, want to wipe out an entire race? The Amalekites, they'd had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to get saved, to accept Christ, because they could have gotten saved just like the Jewish people did, but they were wicked, they were evil people, they were corrupting his people. So God said, we've got to get rid of the sin in the land. So he says, Saul, go down and destroy the Amalekites. He said, kill every single solitary one of them. Every person, every animal, wipe everything off the map, destroy all of them. Again, very simple instructions. So Saul goes down. Great battle. He destroys all the people except the king. Saves the king for, trade negotiations with another nation later. Goes down and wipes out all the animals except the good ones. Man, that's a nice cow. Nice ox over there. It's a shame to let that ox go. It's like if God would tell us, go and wipe out this city over there. We go over there and go, man, you know what? That's a nice Ford truck over there. Be ashamed to blow up that Ford truck, don't you think? Let's just keep that Ford truck for ourselves. Man, we'll put kids in there. We'll bring them to church on Sunday. We'll do a good work for God with that Ford truck. That's exactly what Saul did. Saul said, it's a shame to waste these things. So let's take them back. Now, he didn't want to bring them back. In his defense, he didn't want to bring them back just to, put them in this and use them. He didn't want to bring them back to increase his herd. He wanted to bring them back to give sacrifices to God. At least that's what he said. He comes back. Samuel meets him. Says, hey, did you do what you were told? I sure did. Remember what Samuel said? Well, then why do I hear those sheep? You didn't leave with sheep. How did you come back with sheep? And you remember what Saul said? Well, it wasn't me, the people. The people wanted to do it. Not taking responsibility. Not saying, you know what, Samuel, I didn't want to obey. He did what he wanted to do. But you know what? We do the same thing. We obey God up to a point until it gets uncomfortable. Then we do it our way. We have a limit of how far we're going to obey God. You know what? We say, man, the Bible says, thou shalt flee fornication, so I will not look at pornography on my phone or my computer. Great, bam. But we watch shows on TV that glorify it. Well, they're not showing nudity, but they're promoting sin. And we're laughing at it. The Bible says fools mock at sin. But we do it all the time. Well, we're going to obey to a point. God told Saul that day, he said, Saul, for you to obey me a little bit is complete disobedience. Partial obedience is total disobedience. You know, we understand that with our kids. You tell your kid, go clean their room. They clean one corner of the room. You know what you say? Why'd you disobey me? Well, Dad, I did some of it. I didn't say do some. I said do all of it. You know, I tell Parker, go mow the yard. He mows 3 strips. Well, Dad, I mowed some of it. I didn't say mow some of the yard. I said mow all the yard. Why did you disobey me? But, well, God, I'm not committing adultery. I'm just looking at stuff. God, I'm not doing anything bad. I'm just gossiping about my neighbors and my coworkers, Lord. I'm not as bad as somebody else. God says partial obedience is complete disobedience. And that's exactly what Saul did. God said he wants us to be holy, and we are holy in the area that we want to be holy in, but we keep the sin that we enjoy for ourselves. David did what God said. Saul did what he wanted to do, and that's what made the difference in their lives. David sought God. Saul sought his own pleasure. We see they had character, disobedience versus obedience. Second thing we see, they had character versus no character. David was a man of character. David had moral integrity. Instead of killing Saul when his men told him to, when his men who are trapped in a cave, fearing for their life, knowing that as soon as Saul sees them, he's going to call in his army and wipe them all out, his men say, go and kill the man and get it over with. David said, I will not touch God's anointed. Even when he had the chance to. And even if we looking at it could say, you know what, he'd be justified in doing that. David was a man of integrity. He was a man of humility. He put others first. Even when facing Goliath, and he goes to face this huge giant, he didn't come to Goliath and say, hey, Goliath, I'm going to kill you. He let everybody know, hey, whatever happens here today, it's all God. You know, the people started singing, it's amazing. David kills one man, and people start singing, Saul killed his thousands, David killed his 10,000s. But David let everybody know, no, it wasn't me. God was the one who did it through me. When being chased, he didn't retaliate. After being anointed king over Israel, he still continued to be a shepherd in the field. He was a man of humility, but he was also a man of courage, fighting a bear and a lion. How many of y'all have killed a bear and a lion with your bare hands? When we lived in Salem a couple years ago, before we bought our house here, there was a little path in the woods that I'd walk down, and I'd take my Bible in the morning, I'd go and I'd pray, and I'd read my Bible. They had a chair in the middle in the path, and you know, I'd sit there and I'd pray all the time, and I'd read my Bible, and deer would always come around, and they'd come pretty close, they'd see me or smell me, and then just dart off into the distance. And one day I was sitting there, and I remember I was on my knees praying, and I heard something big walking down the path, and all of a sudden I heard, whoosh, and then just something tearing through the woods, and I looked up and thought, that is the biggest black dog I've ever seen in my life. And then it stopped. I said, that's a bear. Now, he was running from me, but from that day on, I prayed with a shotgun. Because I ain't David. I ain't going to fight a bear, grab him by his face and say, get away from me, bear. I'm going to run in the tree, and that's stupid because he can climb. I don't want to fight a bear. I don't want to fight a lion. But David had the courage to fight a bear and fight a lion, but he also had the courage to fight Goliath. Lance Witt said this. He said, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. The deeper my intimacy with God, the greater my tenacity to stand courageously. Abiding in the vine not only produces fruit, it makes us strong and courageous. Saul had no character. Saul had no integrity. Saul would lie And he would even lie to himself so much that he started believing the lies. He lied to Samuel whenever he did wrong. He tried to kill David on many occasions. Integrity in the life of a believer is the sign of a relationship with God. That's why Saul had none, because he had no relationship with the Father. He was fearful. In 1 Samuel 15, verse 24, the Bible says, and Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord. Man, good start. He's admitting his sin. And thy words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Saul said, well, Samuel, I sinned because I feared what and he didn't fear that people would rise up against him. He feared what the people would think about him. He said, Samuel, I just didn't want people to think bad of me. So I did what they wanted to. And that's pride. I don't want people to think bad of me, so I'm scared of what's going to happen, so I obey their voice. He didn't take responsibility. He's afraid of the people that he was king over, the people he's supposed to lead. He said, Samuel, I couldn't help it. I was just so scared of what they'd think. 1 Samuel 17, when Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. The king, the tallest man in the nation, the man who should be out there fighting Goliath, he's too scared to go out. When you are not connected to the vine, when you have no relationship with God, when you have no trust in God, you become a person of no integrity. You become a person who is full of fear, and you become a person who is full of pride. What made David who he was? What made David courageous? What made David a man of integrity? What made David a man of humility was not David. It was God in David. It was a result of his relationship to God the Father. What made Saul who he was came from a lack of relationship of God. Character is not what I do. Character is who I am because of God. So we see that David had character and Saul had no character. Here's the third thing. We see dependence on God versus dependence on self. David depended on God. David knew he needed God. When fighting Goliath, David knew he needed God to win. He said in 1 Samuel 17, he says, then said David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts. He said, look, you're coming to me with all the training you could possibly get. You're coming to me with the greatest weaponry available to mankind right now. You're coming to me with great big muscles and huge strength, but I'm coming with God. And that's all I need. He didn't need 5 stones. He didn't need 1 stone. He needed God. He knew he needed God. Saul relied on himself. That's why he wouldn't fight Goliath, because he knew he could not win. He had to be the priest to make sure the sacrifices got done. When leading the army, Saul didn't seek God. He did what he thought was best. He did what he wanted to do. Whether we understand it or not, we all need God. And until we get to the point where we realize we need God, we're going to lead a life like Saul. You know, David's life is summed up in 1 Samuel 13:14. Nope, go back. It's my fault. I forgot to do it right. I take the blame here. Or John, because he messed it up. 1 Samuel 13:14. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart. That describes David. A man who sought after God. A man who desired God. But Saul's life is summed up in his own words in 1 Samuel 26:21. I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly. Saul said, I've made terrible mistakes with my life. I've messed up horribly. What a legacy to get to the end of your life and realize, man, I did everything wrong. Man, I should have followed God and I didn't. And by now in Samuel 20, it's too late. Philistines are coming. He's going to die the next day. He has no opportunity to change his legacy or change anything. He looks at his life. He looks at how he wasted it, pleasing himself, and said, I've played the fool. John Otterberg said this. He said, when a man plays the fool, he acts without God's direction. He disobeys God in the details. He puts a spiritual spin on his disobedience. That's what Saul did. He persuades himself that he is doing the will of God. He allows jealousy and hatred to control him, and he fights against God. Both of these men were just regular men. Both of these men were just regular men that chose to follow God and obey him, or they chose to disobey him and to rely on themselves. To live a life of disobedience, to live a life of character and dependence, I must daily, to live a life of obedience, a life of character, and a life of dependence on God, I must daily allow Jesus' life in me to be lived through me. You know, the Bible says in John 15:4, it says, "Abide in me, and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me." You know, the branch does nothing to produce fruit but stay attached to the vine. The connection to the vine determines how much fruit the vine produces. And oftentimes a vine gets sick, or a branch gets sick, or it gets broken in a storm, and it doesn't have the ability to get the nutrients it needs from the vine, that branch begins to die. Same thing is true in our life. We can do nothing to please God unless we're abiding in the vine with God, unless we're strengthening our relationship with him. We've got to make sure that we're not allowing sin, disobedience, junk to clog our relationship with God. You know, just yesterday, for about the last week, me and April have noticed that our dishwasher has not been cleaning as well as it should be. So, you know, we got Lexi to start doing it. We noticed our dishwasher wasn't cleaning, especially the top rack. You know, you'd wash all the dishes and pull them, and they're still dirty. And you're like, man, I just don't know what's wrong with it. And so I opened the door, and I jimmied the switch so it could be on, and I could see what was happening inside. And just the top rack wasn't getting any water. The bottom water was just kind of piddling out. And I thought, man, we need a new dishwasher. We need a new motor. And I couldn't really do either one. So, you know what, I'm going to see what I can do with this thing. So I got in there. I took all the stuff out, and I took all the guts out, and I started looking at the screen. And that thing was just clogged. It was just yuck. So I pulled that out, we washed that out, and just, you got down to the food chopper, then just all in that thing that drains all the water is just, I mean, there was glass in there. I don't know why there was glass in there. There was a bologna wrapper in there because my kids don't scrape their plates good enough. Just all kinds of junk in there. Got in there, cleaned that all out, sucked out all the garbage with my shop vac, cleaned it up real good, put all the stuff back, turned the dishwasher back on, jimmied the switch to get the door up, and man, the water just, I got soaked. Thought, well, I guess it's working now. The water could not get to where it needed to be because of all the garbage that was clogging it up. The Spirit of God cannot help us be what we need to be when we let all the garbage in our life clog it up. The sin, the disobedience, the lack of character, the lack of integrity. God calls us to abide in him. We cannot obey God. We cannot depend on God on our own. It comes out of a connection to Christ. So what made the difference in David's life and his relationship? What made the difference in David's life was his relationship with God. It wasn't because David was some super person. It was because David relied and walked with God. When he got away from the vine, David sinned. When David got away from God, he sinned. Saul left a horrible legacy, not because he was a bad person, but because he didn't abide with God. What type of legacy are you leaving behind us right now? What type of legacy are you building in your life? Are you leaving a legacy of obedience to God, of character and integrity, of dependence on God? Or are you leaving a legacy of disobedience, no integrity, and dependence on self? The choice is ours. Who will we be? Will we be like Saul, or will we be like David? Let's pray. Heavenly Father,